It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We want to welcome back to the program. We got State Representative Dan Sullivan in the studio with us. Dan, welcome, sir.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're, the third week of session? How things are going so far?
Well, they're going really well. You know, I had a meeting this weekend with a group, or met with a group. They were meeting, and they'd have met with or without me. But, you know, I had the feeling during that meeting that I was right back with the founders. People sitting down, discussing the Constitution, discussing their rights. And I'm not going to mention what group it was, but it was really refreshing and incredible to sit there for an hour and a half. Nobody left. Nobody got up. And we talked about what our constitutional rights are. We talked about what our God-given constitutional rights are. And it was really curious because I was anxious or interested in what would happen in church yesterday about the discussion of the issue in New York. And I know you talk about that extensively.
Oh, my gosh.
Where people cheered about the abortion rights and about the ability of a state who can now, if a child survives abortion, they can kill the baby. And I fully expected from our church to have a prayer about that, and for our nation to be healed, and for us to repent, just not only as a state of Arkansas, but as a nation. And I'm really concerned that our pulpits are silent on this issue and not standing up. And so when I asked a few people after church what they thought about that, you know, they were, well, that's just not our style. We don't talk about that that way. We don't address those issues that way. And I started thinking about the group that I met with on Saturday and how they understood that those rights are God-given and that the government should make no law that supersedes God's law. And I thought about people's unwillingness in the setting on Sunday to stand up and talk about our God-given rights compared to the people on Saturday who were talking about their God-given rights. And I'm really concerned that our faith-based community, their willingness to stand up for what God says, which is now being superseded by what the state says. And people need to realize that there are Arkansas legislators right now crafting language that about abortion, about free speech, about Second Amendment, that would limit our God-given rights and let government supersede those. I hope I'm not digging down too deep in that, but it's really concerning.
But people have to stay engaged.
Stay engaged, and it was so refreshing to hear people. And I know there's a new organization being founded, the Freedom Coalition, I think.
You mean the Arkansas Liberty Coalition?
Liberty Coalition,
yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. You know, now the Patriots of Act 746, 17,000 strong, have a voice. And I sure hope people will seriously consider what's going on with the Liberty Coalition. Look into that, because we and people need to speak up about their rights.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, you mentioned a bunch of stuff there, but you also mentioned freedom of speech. Now,
yes.
There was a story, and there's an ongoing lawsuit because of Arkansas State University, my alma mater, and freedom of speech zones, or there was a Turning Point USA attempted to, I think, set up a booth and get, get people to sign up for that organization, and they were prevented from doing so, and that resulted in a lawsuit, correct? Kind of refresh our memory on that.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that lawsuit is still standing, and as a matter of fact, across the state in many of our universities, we have varying degrees of limits on free speech. Again, another God-given right.
Yeah.
I, along with Senator Hammer and several other senators and House members, have been working on a free speech bill. We'll be filing it. I think it may have been filed Friday, but it'll be filed this week, that will eliminate those free speech zones. It goes a long way towards protecting our religious organizations that are on campus too. Many of our churches have student centers and such on campus, and while many of our universities are friendly towards that, their policies are not. And often it's a matter that they just choose not to enforce a policy. So this bill will go a long way towards allowing free speech on campus, getting rid of those free speech zones, protecting our organizations and such that are on campus. That should be filed this week, and I look forward to that passing.
Now, so there's another one. There's another freedom of speech bill that has been filed as well. That's already been filed. This one, so do you know about the other one? What's the difference between them?
Representative Hammer and I both had bills on that.
Okay.
And we got together, and now there'll be one bill that goes forward.
Okay, so it's going to be one.
Yeah, it's part of that good legislative process where you have people who both have an idea about freedom and liberty who sit down together and work through it. The big question out there, Paul, there's a continuum. What kind of language do you allow that doesn't cause a disruption on campus? To use foul language, and there are words that can be used, language that can be used, insightful language that can be used, that can be disruptive on a college campus. So you have to draw a line somewhere as to what's allowed and what's disallowed to allow the university to have some control over speech. They need that over the freedom of speech. So Senator Hammer's bill and mine had a little bit different language in there, and we sat down together and worked that out. So we think it has the right tone about giving the university the opportunity and the responsibility of controlling chaos on campus, what might lead to chaos on campus, but also allowing free speech. And I think we reached a good settlement on that.
Okay, so both bills were trying to solve a problem, and you guys
which was limiting free speech on campus.
Yeah. We don't want that. We don't want that.
We want free speech on campus. We've gone a long way towards getting rid of these free speech zones.
Okay, good.
We've gone a long way towards allowing not just students, but people like you and me to go on campus and talk about what free speech is.
Okay, so that'll be filed this week. What else we got going on?
Well, I'm working with Senator Gary Stubblefield. And I'm going to be the one to carry his bill in the House. He's the one that worked on it, but it's very similar to Mark Johnson's bill about retirement benefits and removing those retirement benefits.
So it's an anti-corruption bill.
Anti-corruption ethics bill, yes, and it is a little bit different than Senator Johnson's, and that it takes a few different remedies. So I'm hopeful that, again, Senator Stubblefield's the lead on this, and I would anticipate he and Senator Johnson probably getting together. But you'll see some good ethics legislation come out, regardless of what it is. But it's pretty strong. When you start taking people's retirement, one of the differences, our Senator Stubblefield's bill talks about when you're convicted of a crime. And there's just a little bit different language in there, but both of them, again, well-intended and doing the right thing, moving in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are the discussions that need to be had. That's what's so positive about it.
Yeah, and that's what really encouraged me Saturday, to hear people talking about these issues. How many groups are there in the state that really talk about what the Constitution says, really stands up for your rights? Conduit is one. You can agree or disagree with them, but there are very few organizations in the state that really lay on the table what your constitutional rights are. And then let's just have the debate. And I've had several debates with Conduit. I agree on some things, disagree on a few things, but we've been able to come on the show and have that debate. And it really, I hadn't thought of this before, but that's exactly what happened at the founding. People talked about what the Constitution said. They talked about what your rights were, and we had that open debate. And I sure hope the citizens of Arkansas will look for, and of course, I think your listeners are on the forefront of that. But at this meeting where I was Saturday, I met a lot of people, first-time people, hadn't really been to a debate like that. I invited somebody, so it's really good to hear that. We're just talking about other legislation we have coming out. I'm working on the advanced practice nurse legislation that's been defeated twice. And much more than twice. I've run it twice.
Well, the one thing about that advanced practice nurse piece of legislation that the medical community needs to understand is that if it passes, the sky will fall.
Well, they have hired more lobbyists.
Oh, I'm sure.
They've hired a bunch of lobbyists coming up, and I have running legislation with UAMS that deals with UAMS, and UAMS lost $30 million last year. They
When you say lost, you mean like
ran-
lost it, or lost it?
Well, that's another discussion. They were $30 million in the red, and some of it was intentional. I don't want to go into the details of that, but they have a new chancellor now, and I've been working very closely with them because that $30 million is taxpayer money. That's money that the taxpayers are paying for health care. They're paying to educate our doctors. And UAMS is a great institution. They're the only institution we have in the state, or well, one of the only now, educating our doctors. So when we lose money in that program, that's $30 million that did not go towards educating physicians in our state. Again, our new chancellor, Dr. Patterson, I'm working closely with him, and I hope that we can have legislation come out of this that will support UAMS and help them to at least break even. I don't want to go into all the details, but there are lobbyists that are hired to kill this kinds of legislation, just like the advanced practice nurse legislation. Paul, it's no different from what happened in the nursing home industry. They are so powerful, and the medical society lobby is so powerful that they don't need all the votes. They just need enough to kill it, which is only usually the difference between 11 votes or 9 votes. And if you are a legislator and you're running for office, you depend on those campaign donations. And guess who makes a lot of campaign donations?
Yeah.
Or you have an opponent, just like I did.
Yeah, from the medical community.
From the medical community. They can afford who tripled my spending.
They outspent you 3 to 1.
Me 3 to 1.
Yeah, you still won, though.
Still won. But that's because the people got out and got engaged. They talked about the issues. They learned about the issues. They held him accountable for his words when he was untruthful and out lied. And the Jonesboro Sun had to run an article on that. That's what we're up against in the freedom argument, to allow people to be free and make decisions on their own. There's a strong lobby opposed to that in all that medical community, whether it's nursing homes, the medical society, and we face a strong uphill battle. So I hope people will get engaged with their local legislators.
I think people we've been talking about how people do want honest government, and, when you do have these big programs or these big industries that the government is already heavily involved in, if we're going to have it and we're going to have a certain level of spending and taxpayer commitment in these, then the people rightfully demand that the money's accounted for and it's spent well, and that when something is not working, that reforms should be welcomed and not resisted.
It's really hard when people call me and they disagree with me. It's really hard. I just soon not take that call. I just soon not have to have that conversation.
But you do take those calls.
You do. Right. And I met with over 200 teachers over a bill last year. I've got a meeting set up with teachers soon, and we don't disagree on much, but 1 or 2 things. But they want to talk with me, and I welcome that opportunity to sit down and talk with my constituents about what the issues are, what the constitutional questions are, what the ethical questions are. Those are the things that we need to have meetings about and sit down and discuss what's best for our state. The people that got left out this last time are disabled.
Yeah.
The people that don't have the resources and the opportunities, they don't have the lobbyists that they can hire to go represent them. And some of our most needy people in the state got left out when these conversations happened about the reform of health care. We had a task force, and we went out and had all these conversations about, how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that. Well, I think the nursing homes were the first ones to cut a deal with the governor's office, and and that was taken off the table early on.
You mean reform in that
The
area?
the reform in that area, and then the behavioral health ended up.
Meaning they said we're not going to reform. Like we've already kind of reached.
Yeah, we've reached an agreement,
Yeah.
and there were several. The dentist reached an agreement with the governor's office pretty early. There are several that did.
And this was back.
This was back 2 years ago.
Yeah, this was
several
back
years,
when
I think
they-
2015 maybe.
Yeah, so when they had the task force on health care or
Yes.
on Medicaid reform.
On
yeah.
Medicaid reform,
Yeah,
and we
okay.
talked about the people that, and of course, this involved Arkansas Works also.
Yeah.
And the 138 million that will be 150 some million, and next year will be 216
It was
million.
only supposed to be 50 million, though. It was only supposed to be 50 million.
Yep. And the people that lost some of their care were some of the most needy people in the state of Arkansas, our people with disabilities, our assisted living. Those communities can't afford to hire lobbyists. And it's very difficult for them to have their voice heard, and get the votes to pass what we need to take care of our first responsibility.
Well, State Representative Dan Sullivan, I know it's going to get even busier. I mean, it's going to.
I'm headed down there as soon as we hang
I
up
know,
here. I'm
I
headed
know.
down there.
Well, best of luck to you. I'll see you down there
Thank you,
tomorrow.
Paul.
And we appreciate you coming on and giving us an update.
Thank you.
All righty.